podcast from Drew and Mike is, I think it's really cool, and that is what I wanted to say.
Two and a mic. Two, 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 two and a mic. Two, 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 two and a mic. Briskby. What makes you feel active? Briskby brings together people who have equipment, kit, gadgets, and knowledge, and people who wish to do something new, find themselves surprisingly in a situation where they can partake in a passion, or who are looking for a real-life sporting, athletic, or spiritual experience. Briskby does all of this, and at the same time is good for the environment, based on the sharing economy principle of making use of products that have already been manufactured, and making sure these are not wasted or left to gather dust in a corner somewhere. It helps people benefit from the expense, and it brings people together too. It's such a great concept, and it's so very, very simple. Here today I speak with Ale, one of the founders of Briskby, and it's great to hear his thoughts on how the company is developing and also some other social topics too. Thank you very much, Ale, for coming back and talking with me. I know how busy you are. Man, I'm so happy to have you back for a start, because this is like take 15, because it's it's impossible to get you.
Been on a roller coaster lately.
Oh man, I tell you, yeah. But and also judging by the look of your knee, you fell off a roller coaster. But anyway, how are you?
Needs aside, all good, all great. We're back to Malta, and thanks for having me again, Zach. I'm sorry because it took a while to get hold of me, but I've been traveling. I've been kids, being sick here and there. How it's like nowadays, especially pre, post, after, during COVID. We have no idea where we're at with that now, but yeah, you're still hanging in there.
Well, absolutely. I mean, please take this as a compliment. That even after all of these mini disappointments, I have persisted, and here you are. And yeah, that's the key thing, is that we get a chance to talk. So yeah, for the rest, it's just a part of the journey, right?
That's so true.
Yeah,
that is so true. We need to welcome whatever we've been offered, so to speak. So we need to deal with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, clearly. And I mean, as you know, I follow you on the social media platforms that at least I am present upon. And yeah, how's Briskby developing? How's where are you guys at now?
It's doing great, man. I mean, we are enjoying the journey together with my colleagues, my co-founder. Of course, it's a startup, so we all know what it takes to develop something that conceptual to something that is factual. So bringing it to reality, it's a different ballgame. But yeah, we are speaking to a different plethora of I would say investors, customers, clients, and dealing with all this at the same time during sometimes twice a day. It's it's mind blowing how we can and we have to adapt quickly to different type of audiences. But it's great. It's doing great. We're having loads of fun, and we're learning. It's learning. It's a steep learning curve, and we are welcoming that too. Although it's even that, it's adapting constantly on a daily basis, and not just different audience, but even to knowledge. Actually, you need to be ready to adapt and shift your knowledge to different fields and bringing it to different grounds. So it's yeah, I love it. I really love the journey. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's very, very hard, but yeah, we are enjoying the journey. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those people who are listening now and who haven't heard the first podcast that we had, do you want to like quickly do a little intro? I mean, you must have done so many little intros of Briskby recently, but yeah.
Yes, well, I am, my name is Alessandro. I currently live in Malta. Life brought me here after a quite a long journey from Belgium to Italy to Southeast Asia, back to Italy, and now in Malta. So I'm currently based here, and during COVID, together with a friend of mine, ex-colleague of mine, Federico, we decided to start this project in order to sort of help people find, different ways to access a diverse experience when it comes to fitness and action sports, more convenient, more safer, and just simply diverse. So basically, we sort of reached out to different stakeholders, got many interviews in, different surveys, and eventually we decided to launch this prototype that was called Fitness Hire back then, but eventually we rebranded the project into Briskby, which is what you find now on the internet. I think it's a project where we basically, in short, it's a marketplace for people to rent out their idle gear or equipment, fitness and action sports, not just limited to individuals, but also to local businesses who seldom have surplus equipment store somewhere in their store premises or storeroom. So we allow them to basically make some money or recover actually some money from the drop down caused by COVID-19, to basically create a new stream of revenues by simply renting out surplus or idle gear and equipment. We eventually moved on to experiences, which is something that we launched a couple of months ago, less than 2 months ago, and we are experiencing a spike in the number of vendors who are willing to create their fitness, well-being, or action sports experience. So we basically have climbing instructors, sailing instructors, yoga teachers, and so on. It's great seeing these from a tiny idea going through market research, prototypes, A/B testing, and now finally you see it's really tangible. It's there and it's being used. It's really it fits the purpose actually. Our purpose is actually to give people a chance to move second-hand gear around without having to fill our landfills. So it's even good for the environment, which is something that it's really, really important for all of us, especially nowadays. So yeah, it's great. It's great. It feels great, but the road is so long that I can't see the end. I don't want to probably see the end. I'm enjoying the journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, thinking about some of the stuff that the experiences angle is great. That's a great concept as well. And yeah, you're a facilitating organization, so you kind of enhance the opportunities for people who have developed skills as trainers and coaches and instructors to share that stuff through your platform as well. And it seems as though this is something which is viable not only in the summer months, but it's also viable any time of the year, because you just simply have to switch the direction or the venue, and you can continue sharing these experiences with people. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's correct. It's not season related or limited. It's actually something that, first of all, it's global. So we have a global footprint. It's not limited to Malta. Yes, at this point in time, probably we have more supply in Malta because I'm here and people, they see my face. So they say, hey, this is not that, abstract. I'm not an NFT. I'm actually a real person. But the project is actually presence on global places. We have instructors and vendors, so to speak, from Australia to Japan and the Philippines, Mexico, US. So it's gone beyond the region specific where we were actually addressing or proposing the project. So that's great. So definitely it's beyond the season. First of all, because we have global regions, so we have different seasons. And secondly, because you have different type of sports that you can practice throughout the year. Yes, you can, kayak in summer and climb in winter, or different type of fitness activities or well-being. So it's always the good time to stay active and do something good for the planet as well, whilst you stay active.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, you've said this a couple of times, and this sort of falls back to the sharing economy concept, which is basically it's a sports sharing economy platform, and well-being, as you say. Some of the articles that I've seen that you've put up really highlight this, and especially from the COVID perspective. So lots of people have purchased sporting items which were maybe compulsive purchases which they don't really use, and so therefore they're like, okay, shit, what am I gonna do with this? I've never used it in my life, and now you've given that product a sort of second wind, isn't it? Because if you don't use those rollerblades, stick it on Briskby, somebody else will use them and you'll benefit from them too, right?
Absolutely, it's a win-win. 100%. Sharing economy is like it's good for the planet and it's good for your pockets as well. But it's also good for other people not to commit to a purchase that they might even change their minds whilst like using it and try something different. So it's just win-win-win, so to speak. So three ways win. So I definitely see the positive of sharing economy. There's no downside. Well, there were many reports actually coming out throughout during COVID, especially during the peak of the pandemic. They were saying that sharing economy was suffering during COVID, and that made sense for businesses such as Uber or Airbnb, where physical contact was part of their business. Like if you jump on a taxi or if you are going into someone else's house, you are definitely in contact with someone. So especially during that time, probably there were data points saying, hey, is sharing economy in trouble? It won't be, and it's not. And actually finally that we are sort of getting out from that I would say hysterical pandemic, and now we are going towards like probably a medical condition, which is normal somehow. We are seeing that sharing economy is still very much alive, and the opportunity is even more there. Yes, it's there's need for that. There's need. I would actually say this as far as there's not enough sharing economy. There should be more in many industries, like from foods. Food waste, for instance, to food delivery. Yes, that's great, and others like there should be more value in the sharing economy. I see that people are being participating more and more into sharing economy. So this is something that I am definitely expecting to grow, not just from a business perspective, but also for ethos perspective. I'm really hoping that this is going to be like something that is going to impact our lives more and more in the future.
I mean, they do kind of say that social change requires like a generation, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years. But what it seems we've seen from the COVID period is a substantial acceleration. So some changes haven't required a generation. Necessity have basically develop these changes automatically. So that's why we've got lots of people are capable of now of using video conferences without, screwing up and forgetting that the webcam is on and going to the toilet, even though that happened a bit at the beginning. But then you've also got people who in the past would have said, yeah, I'm never going to rent somebody else's skating shoes. And now they think, 1 minute, that's a great idea. Or renting out their own equipment is no longer like a random concept. It's because I don't have time to use it during the day, so why not let somebody else use it? And also with Briskby, there's the sort of guarantee that you provide with the insurance, which is tied in. It's fantastic. So there's definitely this sort of the change, the psychological change, which has been I suppose a natural consequence of what we've experienced the last 2 years.
It is both probably was like a generation thing that pushed the so-called rental generation, and COVID definitely digital adoption of different from different streams of or arrays of needs. For instance, as you said, social conferencing, for instance, it's one of those. It's been pushed to adoption, which is great. But on the other hand, I'm saying that the need was already there. I mean, sharing economy or rental generation, it's something that probably my generation didn't fully understand until it really was there. And so I wouldn't say as far as Generation Z is gonna, change or change the way we use things, because it was already there. They will just sit on something that it's obviously good for them, and not necessarily pushed by the previous or what it was the world as we know it before. It's just simply different and naturally adopted by new generations. That's how I see it.
Do you think there's a chance then also that manufacturers will understand this and go back to the increased quality of the 50s and 60s when they made stuff to last, whereas since the 80s and 90s they make stuff to last until the guarantee finishes, and then you've got to take your ass to the shops to buy another one? So, do you think it's possible that we can consider the longer lasting, better quality products to start being manufactured as well?
Well, we hope actually that rental generation will push eventually manufacturers to build more quality, to basically rely more on the quality rather than quantity. How many times you and I, we are from the same generation, and now we're buying a car and we say all these electronics, oh god damn it, it's gonna screw up my car. And when it was manual, actually, it was manual. We knew how to fix it, and we probably knew that it would have broken. So it's a mix of things, that we need to look upon. And one is definitely quality, and the other one is quantity because of scarcity of resources. So it's fundamental that we use less and we use better. Whatever assets that we are purchasing in for our needs, it needs to be looked upon as long-lasting equipment, or even if it's a fridge, has to last longer than it's being conceived for, And so definitely it's a direction, and I'm sure also inflation is going to impact on the purchase style of consumers. So even consumers are going to drive this adoption more and more towards quality rather than quantity. So we are in the midst of this sort of needs coming from consumers, which is renting rather than still buying. So I'm buying when I'm sure that this is gonna last and this is for me, rather than I'm buying because of this craze of having to buy at any cost. As you said, during COVID, there was this huge trend of people running to the store and buying fitness equipment, for instance, because we're stuck at home. So we had to train at any cost, because we were reading on our digital mag that it was like the new trend was like to train on YouTube. That's great. I mean, nothing against that, but people were like going absolutely crazy to buy things that eventually they just like store away and they forgot about that. So what was it? BBC said that almost 63% of British citizen, they sort of regrets the purchase they did during pandemic, because like, yeah, it was absolutely the momentum of like, buying that. Or like sweets, indulgence, like in food was like, everything was like, the trend was like, healthy snacking, for instance, and eventually got into like, indulgent snacking again. So plenty of sugar and so on. So we need to really separate what is the craze of the moment, the trend of the moment, which was pushed by a trend or was pushed by a necessity. And so, yes, definitely what you said is something that we are really looking, being a player in the sharing economy industry, as something that will definitely impact not our business, but what's on top of us, so manufacturing and the industry. They have to adapt to social challenges and needs.
Yeah, and also a part of this sort of emergence. I mean, I still see people who are rather untrusting in many ways that the pandemic is over. For some people, the pandemic was over before it began, of course, because they didn't follow any of the guidance anyway. But the experience side of things suggests like groups, and yeah, so you said this is like a huge growth area. You can see it's really boom shooting up. So people really want to mingle. People really have this passion to get together with others, like-minded people who have common interests, and to share these experiences, not just the economy, but the experience.
Yeah, I think we learned something from COVID. Whether you are like seeing COVID as like something that been artificially created, or if you see it as a a real thing that happened. However you see that, we understood that social gathering is so important, so valuable, and it does really impact our lives. I mean, I'm a strong believer, probably has been like coming from a different generation than the current one, but we do believe that sharing experiences, it's fundamental for us to grow as individuals, and as a social and as a community. So it's not just like something that it's been pushed by the isolation caused by COVID. It is something that it's always been there in different ways and forms. So it's for like-minded people, but also for people who are just like wanting to experience something new and different, and we allow them to discover their true selves somehow.
No, it's a bit like giving people an open doorway into a dream, an opportunity to sort of discover that world a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. They need to participate, and it's key to, personal growth. So, I mean, it's great if we share our stories and experiences through social media. And we are definitely digitally into digital economy, but we want people to get out there on their feet, get on the move, being active mentally and spiritually. And it's there's no way you can do it by sitting in front of a screen on a daily basis and purchasing equipments that you're gonna leave in store.
Absolutely. And what's really funky is that you automatically move us on to the next point, because I've got on my sheet work-life balance. And that's basically kind of what you're referring to here. So you facilitate other people to more easily establish a balance in their lives. You create the opportunity for them to do this without a huge expenditure at the beginning. How do you feel about that?
It's the whole purpose of Briskby when it was born. The idea is actually to give people a different way to access active lifestyle, and it's important for us. As I said, it's relevant that people are sort of waking up. COVID was a shake to the world in terms of well-being and health, and not just from a medical perspective. I'm saying for people being stuck at home and just like not doing much and giving up on like a healthy balance, healthy lifestyle. Also, the stress that being caused by sticking up all together in the family, especially when you have like kids jumping around the whole day. It is hard. It is hard. So it is now time to get out there and get on the move, and release toxins and yes, and sharing experiences. It's fundamental. I couldn't stress more on this. It's fundamental.
Mm.
Um,
You know it personally, right? Because you you guys work crazy hard as well. You've got kids, and yeah, obviously as parents, you need a certain amount of patience. You need a certain amount of understanding and energy, and also time for each other. But on top of that, time for yourselves. So. Yeah, I mean, you showed me your injury, so therefore it's quite clear that you're out there as well, trying to participate. Um, it's a challenge, isn't it? It's never ending.
it's like a hamster. It's like feels like being a hamster, because you basically like especially during COVID and this remote work type of uh, professional life that we are into now. It's basically leaves you behind the screen most of the time, probably dropping your balance, your life balance. And it's important that we sort of like stand up and get out there and experience being active somehow. As I was telling you, having kids around, having a startup, it hadn't been easy. It hadn't been easy at all. It's and actually during COVID, I had my second daughter was born, so um, it's been a beautiful time, but at the same time super challenging. Fitting in schedule with calls with clients and a startup that is like taking off to build and so on. It's been absolutely crazy, and so it's important that we get some time for ourselves and listen to a great podcast like yours or others, and sort of rebalance spiritually, mentally, and physically. We really need to strike a balance between these three components. We are not made of just flesh and blood, but there's a soul, there's a mind that we need to nurture. So we need to find our ways, whatever you like it, but we need to find it. Otherwise, we drown, and that's very much true. We drown in, the psychological effects, downsides of this sort of isolation or lockdown. They're being dramatic. My wife, she's in the psychology field, so I know for a fact that if you don't find a balance for yourself, you can't just aim at balancing the family lifestyle. So yes, you need to look upon yourself in terms of well-being, mentally, physically, and psychologically.
Yeah, I mean it's curious because when I was growing up, the term startup never really existed, whereas companies had to start somewhere. As in, startups have always existed. This entrepreneurial spirit has always existed. Maybe it just didn't have the same level of terminology and government support that perhaps you can find now. Not just governments, but also in investment funds and so on. I have a few other friends who don't have their own startups necessarily, but they work at startups, and it's such a lot of work. I mean, we talked about this a little bit the last time as well. Um, And you also mentioned how it's possible for you to be able to, have those balances and find the balances, because each person has, their own way of finding a balance. We don't all do the same things. But isn't it also simply a part of the decision making process that you have to decide, no, today I have to do this because I haven't done it enough? As in, do you have that kind of discipline to be able to say, I have to do this? There's no choice.
I wish I had more. Put it this way: I always get up in the morning saying, "Hey, today, let's not forget to, cut half an hour for yourself. Whether it's like meditation, whether it's like, a jog down the street, or uh, whatever it makes you feel good with yourself. Just take that half an hour." I know it sounds like absolutely bizarre, and you like, hear listen to this like, great podcast, and it's always like, kind of nice and shiny, but it's not always possible, especially when you have kids around, needs around, or people who needs your help. Talking about parents, for instance. So it's unfortunately that half an hour, which is fundamental for yourself, it's not always possible. So yes, I would like to stick to that sort of discipline, but it's not always possible. So you have to accept that sometimes you're gonna skip it. Sometimes you're not gonna be good with yourself, and you need to be indulgent with that idea. So I've come to terms with that, and yeah, and I know that I can, like, jot down the perfect schedule for on a daily basis. So I need to allow that. If it was Monopoly, the unforeseen, I need to allow that. I need to allow that to happen, because it will happen anyway, regardless of how much in control I am with my schedule. So yes, that's number one, and that happened to our scheduled podcast, as you know. So I'm actually the living response to that.
I didn't want to be critical. That wasn't my. That's not the direction I was going. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, it is something that I need to allow, that unpredictable issue to rise up on a daily basis. And the other thing is that startup. It's something that if you look back, I mean, any company is a startup. Any company is a scale up. And so startup was coined, I think, by the Silicon Valley in the early 2000s, late 99, I suppose, late 90s, to basically define this tech word, tech startups, which now probably it's not just tech as we know it. It's probably a little bit more, but there's always a tech something. So whether it's fintech, medtech, health tech, and so on, so on. So as long as you attach this tech to something, probably you are more in the definition of a startup. Now, however you call it, starting a company, it's a long journey. It's long shot. It's very lengthy, hard, and takes loads of commitment beyond what you initially committed for. So it's also like marrying to an idea. How long can you stay married to that idea? You need to be very solid within yourself, within your initial plan, and say whether, like, after 3 to 5 years, that's still feasible. Have we achieved what we needed to achieve? And then you have to make the hard decision whether to drop it or continue. Now, the hard decision to continue, it's clearly not hard because you have achieved the results that you were expecting or exceeded them. But if you don't, then you have to sort of let it go. And it's very hard. I was reading a book of this great mountaineer guy who said he's probably one of the most known mountaineer. And he basically said that the hardest part of the climb, it's not actually to climb the mountain itself. It's actually not to let it go of the summit when you can't climb it because the risks are too high, the stake to lose your life is so high that it's not worth. And even though it took 8 days to get up there and you're just like 100 feet away from the summit, you have to be ready to let it go. And it's the hardest decision of your life because you are in full adrenaline, full pain all over your body, but you need to let it go. And that is the highest and probably the most valuable thought or knowledge that you have to keep within yourself if after a certain amount of time you don't get to those results or you don't see things align enough to to continue. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, there's so many sort of principles from sport and other kind of endeavors which we can really bring into the business world. Um, when you don't, for example, succeed in an undertaking, that doesn't mean it was a failure, because you've learned something there. You've established a method which you can then use for future exercises. But then also there, I mean, the example of the mountain climber. If you are running a project as a company and this project is very time intensive and you've invested a lot of money in it, but at some point you realize that the circumstances have now changed, that project is no longer viable for your company, don't keep doing it just because you've done it all this time. Save yourself, refocus, and then redirect your efforts so that you do something which is perhaps more beneficial for the company where it is today and not when you started your project maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, so many times when I talk with people who work for these large established companies, because startups are a bit more dynamic and flexible. But these larger, more established companies, they have like 10-year projects. And then when you ask people, why are you still working on this project? They're like, I don't know,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
it's just that's my job now. It's
Mm.
no longer part of a project. That is the job. Um, and I think perhaps sometimes we become too comfortable in that. And this is also why I really like the adventurous element of what you're doing, because you're always being tested on a sort of daily basis,
Yes.
and you're being questioned. Am I doing this the right way? I think that's just a great. Yeah, it's just great.
Yeah, it's actually part of that very initial idea that I shared with you in this podcast was like, how much are you enjoying the journey rather than the goal? They are two very two different things. And when I'm into my startup and I deal with different investors, sometimes I've been asked what's the exit strategy. Of course, it's important. Don't get me wrong, especially from the investor's eyes to understand where and what is your goal, but sometimes that question is it's actually sort of out of context because it's the journey, the kind of exit strategy. You know what I mean? And I know it's hard to make a difference between you as a person and you as the founder or CEO of a company. So you need to provide those answers, and that's fair enough. But sometimes there's a sort of disconnection here. And I would like that to be more aligned because sometimes I hear, hey, we invest in you as the founder and you and your team, which is more relevant and more important for us. But that's not really true because there's always, of course, the very keen eye on the exit strategy. So how true is that you are investing in me or my team because we are eventually, undertaking a journey, a very long, difficult, hard journey, which is made of like daily commitment, renewal of commitment versus the exit strategy. So sometimes there's like, I feel there's a disconnection here. And I would love to hear more about other entrepreneurs, especially in this space, because, the journey may lead on to failure. Hence, the exit strategy is not achievable anymore. But yeah, when you have investors, of course, there are like some type of answers that you have to be absolutely crystal clear. Although crystal clear as well, it's that it's a it's a very questionable answer to provide. That is going to be my exit strategy in 7 years. Really,
Yeah. No, I get that. And I mean, you also kind of, again, greatly introduced the next and final topic, which is basically about culture. And culture is not only, defined by our individual background and, where we come from, sort of ancestrally, but also the culture of business that we sort of focus on, and the culture that we like to build within our organizations. I could only imagine that a startup built by Alessandro has an expression of who Alessandro is. How much of you have you managed to put into Briskby? How much of Briskby is you? And is it Federico? You said is your
yeah.
partner? Yeah. So how much of Briskby is the character that is, or are, Alessandro and Federico?
That's a great question. I mean, it is something that you shape on. I mean, on it, as I said, on a daily basis, I'm recommitting, I'm renewing the commitment, the initial commitments on a daily basis. But yes, there's an element at the beginning which you won't deny, so to speak. You won't deny where you come from. You will not deny what's relevant for you. And you cannot overstep those profound beliefs that made what you are and made you build that project as well. It's a mix of who you are and what you want to be within that project. What is the purpose of this project or this startup, and eventually what is the purpose of your own goal, personal achievements in life. Now, when I say that, I'm not using big names quotes, but definitely there was one which I'm not naming because we all know who it is. But it is do what you love. Do what you love is always something or do what inspires you most, I would say, because it's not always possible to do what you love, really and truly. I mean, it's a bit naive, in my opinion, to say, hey, do what you love regardless. Hey, I need to feed my family first. That's it. That's reality. So let's not be but you still can find in whatever you do something that inspires you to do that better. And there's a deep connection of what you're doing within yourself. If you find that, you can still kind of give the best of yourself in what you are doing. So having said that, there are things that we won't accept naturally. And I could name a few, of course, which is I cannot not accept diversity within my working environment or within my circle of friends. Racism, for instance, it's something that I could not live with, and so naturally when you build your friendships or your relationships, it's the same as building a company. I would never get to work with someone who's the best professional in that field, but has culturally or different views than mine in that context, in that extent. So that would poison at least what my strong beliefs would be. I found that in my career, it happens. And even when I was supervised, it happens. And it is hard to, find a compromise to keep on working with people that are coming from, I'm not saying walks of life, because I love staying with people with different walks of life. And I do find my real self within that arrays. But when I find someone who's radically, different or thinks in such a different way, especially when it comes to like big themes as diversity and racism and acceptance. I just can't. And so yeah, my whoever I am surrounded with, it's gonna be the expression of that openness. Otherwise, there's closure.
Yeah,
Would answer that. If
that's
you
why
if you know what I mean.
I do. That's why I love you, Ali. Because these are principles to live by, to die for, and
Absolutely.
there's no compromise. And I mean, I think we've both learnt this on our parts. I mean, there have been episodes in my life where I wish I was more vocal, and where I'd sort of stood up a bit more. Never again. I'm never going to regret not standing up ever again, when the opportunity arises. And in many ways, the story you told me about when you visited Africa all those years ago, it was one of those inspirational sort of learning blocks, for me too. It's knowing when to speak, and and so on, and how. And yeah, I can, I can see how that would be
Um,
introduced in the way you work. Yeah.
Man, yeah, it's easily so true that nowadays, especially now in our probably stage of where we at currently with our own life, that you just wouldn't accept that anymore. It's just not acceptable, and it's not a social cue. It's just not them acceptable. Um, I give you an example. Yesterday was like really this is happening just 24 hours ago, so it's fresh. And was sitting in this workplace. It's a great place here in Malta, where I seldom go, just to have a break from the craze of the family work environment. So I was here, I was having a coffee, and there was an Italian coffee maker there. And there were these two guys working in the restaurant of this place. Two guys from Pakistan, I suppose. I have no idea. Anyway, we're like chatting and coffee, and I said, "Hey, that's great. It's beautiful espresso." So I sat down there and started working, and suddenly a bunch of Italians came in. They were like, probably from a gaming company. They were like, very loud, as you know. Italians are able to be quite loud,
I may have
and
experienced this once or twice. Yeah.
I guess so. And nothing. I heard this comments coming from one of this guy. I won't say where he was coming from, but it was Italian. Said, "Hey, this, you know, addressing the guy from Pakistan. He's not able to do a coffee because he's like, and I just kind of, I couldn't swallow that, and I said, "Hey, I'm sure he's gonna make a beautiful coffee. Have you tried it?" And we had a little argument. It was like just kind of couldn't in 2022 accept or hear that silliness. And probably was like not even racist himself, but it just came out that racist kind of comments. And when they left, I went to this guy and said, I'm really sorry. I really apologize because I'm Italian as well. I really apologize. We are not just all like that. And he said, no worries. It was really humble. And he said, this is like, I'm sure they were joking, but what is the fine line between joke and the racism? If we keep on accepting that as a joke, we actually accept what's happening even now. And uh, who's real, anyway, it's a big topic, but it is what we stand for, and even in the values that you bring in a company, and the people that are working with you, they need to be part of that, culturally and professionally. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Making
And
money, just like revenues, it's just that the metric that we measure, isn't it just like more of a qualitative metrics rather than a quantitative metric? Like, hey, that's a great work environment. Is there a metric for that? Like, okay, I would say hiring versus quitting rate, for instance, that would be a great match. But it's something more invisible out there, which is like, hey, I really, really enjoy the spirit of this company because it stands for these rights, regardless if it's a commercial company or an NGO. It's very important in my opinion, and unspoken somehow.
Absolutely. And the feeling that you get when you leave work, that you've either done something of importance, or you've contributed to a group that you have an emotional connection with. And I think the best thing is when somebody actually leaves your organization because of whatever reason, but they leave crying because they've truly appreciated the experience of having worked with you. They've learned something from you. And every journey has many different stages anyway. As you just said at the beginning of our talk, how many stages has your journey had until now? And the same is for me as well. So I would sincerely hope that the Italian boy who said that racist slur will reflect upon your words and will learn from it, because that is blatantly racism. It's a very racist term. It's a very rude term. And I empathize with the kids, with those guys who who were there. And unfortunately, because they're in a service industry, they may feel they have to accept it. But no, you don't have to accept it. There's no reason why anybody should accept any kind of discrimination, whether that's somebody who is racially treated because they're of whatever background that they have, or if it's a woman as waiting tables, they should not be abused at all, and they should not have a fear of losing their job if they say something either. So I can only imagine that guy was so happy that you stuck up for him, because he probably felt he couldn't. And
yeah, it was the right thing to do. I mean, like, hopefully many would have done the same. It was just actually a passing line. I just said, hey, I'm sure he's going to make a great coffee. Have you tried it? But in a way that I was really trying to make him reflect upon what he said. What actually struck me the most is that this bunch of, they were like bunch of 8, 10 kids. Kids as in no, they were in their 20s, but they were laughing at that. And so that was kind of the sad part of this was not really the comment, it was the audience. And we're like, hey, I don't know. It's it is sad, especially in a place which is really multicultural, Malta. But there's always an underlying racism everywhere you go, isn't it? And it's something that I don't know. Probably I've been, as you did, I've been living abroad for most of my life. Never question who I was hanging out with in the sense of is it from different race, ethnic, or whatever. I really just enjoy the presence and being in this different type of cultural environments. That is so hard for me to see this happening. It's beyond my comprehension. In all honesty, it's something really old-fashioned, and would be great to eradicate that once and for all. That's it, isn't it?
That'd be a great dream. Yeah, maybe we could do a startup to eradicate racism. I don't know how that would work, but that would be a fantastic undertaking. Alet, thank you very much for your time, especially as I know how hard it is to make the time. But yeah, it's great talking with you as always, and I do look forward to our next chat. And I hope it won't be so challenging to organize it.
I'm looking forward for not having another lockdown anytime soon. So yes, definitely. Yeah. Thank you, and I appreciate that you wanted to have me as a guest here. And great, love talking to you as well.
Two and a mic.